The IS-1 tank emerged from the Soviet need to upgrade the struggling KV-1 tank, eventually leading to the development of the IS-2 with a powerful 122mm gun to counter German Tigers and Panthers. Initially, the IS-1 was equipped with an 85mm gun, but it was quickly replaced by the IS-2 for its superior firepower and armor. The IS-2 proved effective in combat, able to destroy German tanks at longer ranges and withstand enemy fire better. Despite its slower rate of fire, it played a crucial role in key battles which turned the tide of World War II, including the Battle of Berlin. An interesting tank with an interesting history, which is worth looking into. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. Hello and welcome to the Bobi and Tanks YouTube channel and enjoy this video. History. The KV-1, the IS tank series predecessor, was criticized by its crews for poor mobility and for not having a larger caliber gun compared to the T-34 medium tank. It was also much more expensive than the T-34 without bringing the combat performance to match. Due to these issues, Moscow ordered assembly lines to ditch the KV-1 in favor of the T-34, raising concerns that KV-1 production would be halted and the SKB-2 design bureau might close. In 1942, the problem was partially addressed by the new KV-1S tank, the tank's attempt at a makeover, but let's just say it was more like slapping a fresh coat of paint on a sinking ship. It had thinner armor, making it lighter and faster. It became competitive with the T-34 but lost its heavy armor advantage. April 1943 marked the end of the line for the KV-1S, with production being gradually replaced by the Su-152 self-propelled heavy howitzer. The capture of a German Tiger in January 1943 prompted the development of a new heavy tank, codenamed Object 237. However, intense tank battles in the summer of 1943 required an immediate response, which meant the Soviets had to bring out their big guns, literally. As a temporary solution, the Soviets created the KV-85 tank, armed with an 85mm D5T gun, capable of penetrating the Tiger 1's armor from 1,000 meters or 3,280 feet. The KV-85 was developed by replacing an Object 237 turret on a KV-1S hull. To fit the new turret, the KV-1S hull was modified to enlarge the turret ring. The radio operator's position was replaced with an ammunition rack for the 85mm rounds, and the hull machine gun was moved next to the driver and fixed in a place for the driver to operate. Between September and October 1943, 130 KV-85s were produced before production shifted to the superior IS series tanks. Like the KV-1S, the KV-85 quickly became obsolete as it was overshadowed by the new IS series as if it was the new Kardashian drama. By the way, IS stands for Iosif Stalin. The Object 237 prototype, originally a version of the cancelled KV-13, was approved for production as the IS-85 heavy tank. The first tanks were delivered in October 1943 and went straight into service. Production ended in January 1944, and its designation was simplified to IS-1 after the introduction of the IS-122, later renamed the IS-2, which we're going to talk about today. The IS-2. By 1943, engineers successfully mounted an 85mm gun on the T-34 medium tank, giving it the same armament as the KV-85 heavy tank. Later that year, the Soviets decided that there was one more thing the IS-1 needed: bigger gun. So therefore, efforts began to upgrade the IS-1 with two possible weapons: the D-25 122mm gun, similar to the A-19 122mm gun, and the D-10 100mm gun, a dual-purpose naval gun. As the decision to upgrade the IS-1 came after the introduction of the new German Panther and Tiger, the Soviets basically wanted to play "my gun is bigger than yours" with the Germans. As you've probably noticed from the prototype name of the IS-2, the IS-122, it's quite obvious which one of these guns was chosen. But regardless, let's talk about each gun. The D-10 had better armor penetration but was less effective with high explosive rounds and was in short supply, so they chose the D-25. Now, why did they choose the D-25 over the D-10 besides the fact that it was in short supply? Well, besides the fact that the D-25 could blow a hole through a pantry like it was made of paper, they chose it because it was available and had superior firepower, delivering more muzzle energy than the older F-34 76.2mm gun. The Soviets considered a new 122mm gun because the 122 and 152mm guns had proven effective against German tanks like the Tiger, Panther and Elephant at Kursk. Basically, as the Germans made their predatory cats larger and more powerful, the Soviets responded by making their guns bigger and more powerful. So by that logic, the Soviets could have created something similar to the Germans' Sturmmörser in response to the Maoists, obliterating it by shooting a 500-kilogram bomb at it. Anyways, let's get back to serious talks. They adapted the A-19 model 1937 field gun, which featured a single-chamber muzzle brake, a recoil grade, and a loading and lifting mechanism from the experimental U-11 combined with an M30 howitzer mount. And just to make sure it could actually tear some German cats apart, they conducted ballistic tests on a captured Panther, because nothing says "we mean business" better than blowing holes in enemy tanks for science. After testing both the D-25 and D-10 guns on the IS-122, the D-25 was selected due to its better penetration capabilities despite a lower rate of fire from using separate shells and power charges. This also explains why the reload rate is so slow in War Thunder as well. I mean, the loader has to load 2 separate 122mm charges, which is not that easy. Soviet tests showed the D-25 could penetrate the front armor of a Panther at 2,500 meters, whereas the D-10 could only do so at 1,500 meters. First deliveries of IS-122s with the D-25 began in October 1943. The D-25T could penetrate the Tiger I's turret and the front hull wells at 500 to 1,500 meters. Looking at armor, the hull of the IS-2 model 1943 could be penetrated by a Tiger I at 100 to 300 meters, while the IS-2's gun could penetrate the Tiger's front armor at 500 to 1,500 meters. The Panther's 75mm gun needed to be within 600 meters to penetrate the IS-2's frontal armor, while the IS-2 could penetrate the Panther at 1000 meters. This means the IS-2 could theoretically destroy a Panther or Tiger before a Panther or Tiger could destroy the IS-2. German armor quality declined in 1944 due to material shortages, making it more brittle. The 122mm HE shell of the IS-2 was highly effective against infantry, obviously because it blew them into pieces, and could damage enemy tanks through mechanical shock even without penetration, talking about big bang bullets. The performance of the IS-2 and Tiger I in combat was largely dependent on the crew and situation, with both capable of knocking each other out at ranges below 1000 meters. But with the yin comes also a yang. The D-25T gun's primary disadvantage was its low rate of fire, initially firing only 1 to 2.5 rounds per minute due to the large size and weight of the shells. The loader had some serious work to do. Design improvements such as the semi-automatic drop breech increased the rate of fire to 2 to 3 rounds per minute, possibly up to 2 to 4 rounds per minute. Additionally, the tank could carry only 28 rounds of ammunition, typically 20 high explosive and 8 armor-piercing rounds, due to the size of the shells and the limited space within the tank. The IS-2's armor was made using casting, which involves pouring molten metal into a mold and letting it cool. This method was cheaper and allowed for more tanks to be built compared to the Tiger II tank, which needed a lot of machining. Respected German engineering became German over-engineering. Casting also allowed for easier changes in the armor's shape and thickness, reducing the outer surface area compared to the tank's volume. However, the metal would shrink and become denser as it cooled, and due to limitations in Soviet casting technology, the armor's thickness could vary even with the same mold. Sometimes lower quality alloys had to be used, replacing nickel with manganese. This made the armor very hard and good at resisting penetration, but also brittle and prone to shattering, just like the hopes and dreams of the crew inside. Production history. The IS-122 prototype replaced the IS-85 and entered mass production as the IS-2. The 85mm guns were kept for the new T-34-85 medium tank, and some IS-1s were rearmed before leaving the factory, eventually being designated as IS-2s. The IS-2 was slightly lighter and faster than the heaviest KV model 1942 tank, with thicker front armor and a better turret design. Its improved armor layout allowed it to carry thicker armor than the KV series while still being lighter. The KV tanks had poorly shaped armor and heavy armor even at the rear, while the IS series focused on front armor, where the most of the action happened. The IS-2 was slightly heavier than the Panther, but much lighter than the Tiger I and Tiger II, with a lower silhouette than both. Western observers often criticized Soviet tanks for their rough construction. Some could even say the IS-2s were rougher than a hangover in Chernobyl. But the Soviets argued that this was necessary due to the wartime needs and the typically short lifespan of their tanks in battle. Early IS-2 tanks can be recognized by their lack of travel logs for the gun barrel, anti-aircraft machine guns, and narrow mantlets. In late 1944, the front hull was upgraded to a single 120mm thick casting angled at 60 degrees. This new design is sometimes mistakenly called the IS-2M, but that term actually refers to a modernization program from the 1950s. Other minor upgrades included adding a travel log at the rear of the hull, a water mantlet, and an anti-aircraft machine gun on the very late models. The 1944 model did not completely replace the 1943 model. Compared to the Tiger I, the IS-2 had better armor despite being 10 tons lighter. I assume this is because it was smaller or at least lower in height. In 1944, the IS-2 was the only large-scale Allied tank with armor that could resist the powerful Tiger 88mm and Panther 75mm guns. In the mid-1950s, the remaining IS-2 tanks, mostly the 1944 models with some 1943 models, were upgraded to the IS-2M standard. This upgrade added external fuel tanks to the rear of the hull. The original IS-2 had them only on the sides, storage bins on both sides of the hull, and protective skirting along the top edges of the tracks. From 1944 to 1945, a total of 3,475 IS-2s were produced, more than the German Tiger I and Tiger II combined. Combat history. The IS-2 tank first saw combat in early 1944 with the Elite Guards Heavy Tank Regiments of the Red Army. Each regiment had 21 IS-2 tanks divided into 4 companies of 5 tanks, each with 1 tank for the regimental commander. These special regiments were used for critical attacks, often needing the charge to break through fortified German positions like anti-tank defenses and bunkers. The IS-2 tanks supported infantry by destroying bunkers, buildings, dug-in weapons, and engaging German armored vehicles. After breaking through, lighter and more mobile tanks took over for further advances and clean-up. The IS-2 first saw action in Ukraine in early 1944, claiming to have sent over 14 Tigers and Elephants into the afterlife while using only 8 of its own tanks. On the morning of August 11, 1944, the 16th Panzer Division attacked the 53rd Guards Tank Brigade supported by the 71st Independent Guards Heavy Tank Regiment in the town of Ogledov. The sandy terrain forced the 11 King Tigers to stay on the roads while the Soviet defenders set up ambushes along the known German routes. When the attack began, Soviet IS-2 tanks destroyed 3 Tiger IIs from a distance of 800 meters, which are about 2,600 feet, and a T-34-76 knocked out another Tiger II from less than 400 meters, 1,300 feet away. Later that day, Soviet forces counterattacked, captured Ogledov, and found 3 abandoned Tiger IIs. Smart Soviets used the opportunity and sent the captured tanks to Kubinka for testing and evaluation. In the northern sector, many IS-2 tanks were used during Operation Bagration, the somber 1944 offensive in eastern Germany. On August 13, 1944, during the Battle of the Sandomierz bridgehead, the Germans launched a strong counterattack with the newest heavy tanks. The battle lasted until August 31, with the Russians in well-fortified defensive positions. They claimed to have destroyed 4 Königstigers and damaged 7 more, as well as 3 Panthers and a giant Jagdtiger SPG. Later, it was revealed that 11 IS-2s from the 71st Heavy Tank Regiment had successfully repelled an attack by 14 King Tigers from the 501st Heavy Tank Panzer Regiment. The battle took place at a range of just 1,967 feet, which are 600 meters, and ended with 3 IS-2s destroyed and 7 damaged. However, the new D-25T gun still took about 20 to 30 seconds to reload, during which a Panther could fire 6 to 7 rounds. The disadvantage seems clear. Additionally, the ammunition was difficult to handle and often in short supply. The IS-2 tanks also earned recognition for their role in battles in the Leningrad front and the Baltic states, where they helped liberate Lithuania and Latvia. However, the offensive stalled at Tallinn, where the 36th Independent Guards Regiment lost 3 tanks and the remaining worn-out tanks were damaged while trying to attack fortified positions. The harsh and marshy terrain of eastern Prussia wasn't suitable for heavy tanks, which faced a well-prepared deep defensive perimeter. The 79th Regiment suffered significant losses there until October, but it was fared better at the Battle of the Nerev River. In Hungary, particularly at Debrecen, the 78th Regiment also suffered heavy losses but claimed to have destroyed 6 Tigers, 30 Panthers, 10 Panzer IVs, 24 SPGs, and numerous defensive positions. In February 1945, the 81st Regiment faced superior forces at Kukinen after capturing Nemiritin. The poorly supported and coordinated assault resulted in heavy losses. On the Vistula-Oder front in January 1945, the 80th Regiment had better luck, destroying 19 tanks and SPGs and numerous enemy positions, significantly impacting the German 9th Army. During the Battle of Berlin, many IS-2 tanks were used to destroy entire buildings and make them collapse like a house of cards with their powerful high-explosive rounds. The assault involved several units which were part of the 1st Belarusian Front, the 1st Guards Tank Army, the 2nd Guards Tank Army, and the 1st Ukrainian Front. The IS-2 tanks were organized into small groups of 5, each supported by a company of assault infantry, which included sappers and flamethrowers. The operation continued until May 1945, with more than 67 IS-2 tanks destroyed in action, mostly by Faustniks using Panzerfausts. In his memoirs, General of the Panther Troops Hasso von Manteuffel reports that during the battles for Targów Rumos in May 1944, the Großdeutschland division he commanded encountered 7 IS-2s which for him, quote, broke the dominance of the Tiger. He had pictures taken of the captured tanks and presented them to Mustache Man at the Berghof together with a projectile to illustrate, quote, the size of the Colossi. During a battle near the settlement of Targów Rumos, a single IS-2 was damaged and later examined by General Guderian himself, who concluded that Stalin was worthy of its name. He called the IS-2 Stalin. He said, "Do not get involved in a fight with a Stalin without overwhelming numerical superiority in the field. I believe that for every Stalin we must account for an entire platoon of Tigers. Any attempts by a single Tiger to fight a Stalin one-on-one can only result in the loss of a priceless war machine." End of quote. Soon, new tactical rules were devised to flank and surround IS-2s and get shots in its vulnerable sides, rear and sensitive shot trap rear turret basket and only shoot at short ranges. Presumably German tactical superiority was again called for the task. Looking at the time after World War II, by the 1950s, the main battle tank concept, which combines the mobility of medium tanks with the firepower and armor of heavy tanks, made heavy tanks obsolete. By the late 1960s, the remaining Soviet heavy tanks were moved to reserve service and storage. However, the IS-2 model 1944 stayed in service much longer in the armies of Cuba, China and North Korea. A regiment of Chinese IS-2s was available during the Korean War but was not used. After the Korean War, China tried to reverse engineer the IS-2 and IS-3 as the Type 122 medium tank, but this project was cancelled in favor of the Type 59, basically a copy of the Soviet T-54A. Anyways, that was all I had to say for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you think I said anything that is not right or you think I should have added any additional information to this video, please let me know in the comments and share your knowledge. Besides that, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.